Thank you so much, Robin. First of all, it's so wonderful to be here at NAB Show. As you said, I'm Ryan Grams. My company is Studio Upgrade. Over there with the neon lights where it says Creator Lab on that green wall that they so awesome, Gigi and her team and Robin and her team and Shona, everybody build this incredible spot over there where there's a couch. And they asked us to bring one of our pop-up podcast studios. So please, after the show, go check it out. We're here to let you guys record content, right? To make a video and have it, and we airdrop it right to you right here on the spot, so you can publish content that you're making here at the show. Okay, so first of all, I'm really curious. I want to get a quick show of hands from everybody here on who is making content for yourself right now, whether that's YouTube, there we go. Yep, so, TikTok, Instagram, social media. Okay, in any form. All right, how about who's making them for their clients? All right, a lot of us, yes. And I'm curious on platforms. Let's just feel free to shout them out a little bit. What platforms are you guys on? YouTube, everything. Facebook, Instagram, everything. All right, same. Yeah, we all kind of doing a little bit of everything, right? And for both the work that I'm doing with my clients and the work that I'm doing for myself, I've found it's super, super, super important to remove as much friction as possible from as many areas as possible. So today, especially with the tight group that we have here, I want to be here really in a classroom setting to answer any questions you might have. And I've got my browser ready to pull up so we can show you some links, give you guys some QR codes on some tips and tricks on especially some specific hardware that I found to make it easy to remove the friction between having the idea and hitting record, right? Because oftentimes we get hung up on say, hey, we gotta turn on the lights, we gotta go, get the camera set, oh, we gotta set the white balance, all that stuff. And some of these things might seem really simple, but that's, I think, what's so great about it, right? Is it doesn't have to be complicated stuff. It just sometimes you need to have a point to think about it. So I want to talk about a few different areas, and I'll break it down into a couple different sections. So when we first started what is now Studio Upgrade, I'll give you a little background on that. We were basically helping people solve the issue of showing up in their Zoom meetings. I could give you a guess what year this might have been when people started doing a lot more Zoom meetings. So we were helping our clients, which were executives, coaches, authors, speakers, that type, and they were obviously not liking to show up on a webcam when they're trying to charge $20,000 to give a presentation, right? So they're like, I need to look better, but I don't have a crew. I can't bring anybody in. And so I started developing these kits that would allow people to, have a setup like on their desk or in an office. And I'll just start pulling some of these up here. Let me turn my screen sharing on real quick. And basically, that is truly what led to the last 6 years developing that and building workflows and systems and designs that really can help us make it easier to do some of that kind of stuff. So if I'll just pull up, there we go. So on studioupgrade.com, these were some of our older kits, some of the setups that you could very quickly and easily have that lives on a desk, right? So as this loads here, I'll give you an idea. And honestly, it's not something that we are selling nearly as many of these. Now we're doing a lot more podcast studios, but the idea behind them, I think, is kind of what I want to talk about. So I'll use this as an example as to what some of the techniques that we use to make it really easy to have something. And this could be on a desk, this could be in a room, this could be whatever. So here we go. Size, I think, is a huge one. And if you go over and look at our studio that we brought, you can see the same thing. Everything is on a 2-foot by 6-foot setup. We've got 3 cameras, 2 lights, and we're used to having stands and cords and cables everywhere. And for a lot of my clients, and even for myself, when I'm trying to make my own content, it can be very intimidating to walk into a space and just to feel a little overwhelmed by all the stuff. So everything that we can do to simplify that, I think, is really, really important. So let's just point out a couple things here. So mini tripods, obviously, you might go, well, what kind of difference does it make? But having something that can live on a table or something that's already existing, I think, can go a really long way. That's a great way to just make your setup a little more compact. And there's a lot of great here at the show. Even Elgato has some great new teleprompters. Newer has some incredibly affordable small teleprompters. And teleprompters, we all know for having words on screen. But as you can see here, having people on screen or even your own video signal looping back out onto the monitor, so they can see themselves, is a great way to make it easy to not have to have your screen flipped out and all this kind of stuff. So having that camera just tied right into that, I find to work really, really well. And then it's hard to see, but right here, there's these little rotating mounts if you have a camera, and we even do this behind the teleprompter. Elgato, let's see, no, not Elgato. Ulanzi, who's right over here, they have this wonderful rotating mount. So your camera, it goes around the lens, can easily go pivot back and forth without having to do like the ball head thing and get it sideways. You can just rotate the whole camera from vertical to horizontal, so you can switch between doing wide and tall content. Of course, that's going to help a ton as well. And then, of course, there's more and more of these small lights. This one here is a newer light. Again, I think newer, Ulanzi, there's so many great vendors here that have small, compact lights. It doesn't have to be a huge, huge system. And especially like I've kind of broken it down for most of my clients. I've oversimplified it. There's either like great big umbrella lights where you see like they're really round and big, really nice and soft, but they take up space in 3 dimensions. Not only are they wide, tall, but they're very, very deep. Some of these LED monitors can be really, really slim. So in a small space, it's just going to help be a lot less intimidating. So you can still get a nice, great big soft light. Newer has some really great options. And, so many vendors are coming out with these things. So of course, I'm sure you guys have been seeing those here on the show floor. I think that makes a really, really big difference. But one of the most important things here in terms of how this is all connected is having it on one dedicated, again, this seems like a really simple idea, but it took me a while to figure this out. Having all the gear on one dedicated power strip, for lack of a better word. I use some fancy network controlled ones where I can control it over the network and it will turn the whole unit on or off. But essentially having a dedicated power strip with a very clear label that says studio, right? Like, and studio only, right? So that when you turn that power strip off, your studio shuts down. And again, this is it's required to have a dedicated setup for this. And that brings me to another really important part. The cameras that I'm using, as much as I would rather shoot on an FX6 or some of these other cameras, or I've got a Red that I love to shoot on, I find there are some incredible options now, especially from Sony and Canon. There's a lot of great vendors here that have cameras that are under $2,000 that will get me, let's call it 90% of the way there for the needs of a lot of my clients who are trying to create content, and even for myself. And so rather than saying, oh, well, I have my Red, why am I not shooting my content on my Red? Because that takes time to set it up. And I have to change it every time. I got to dial in the settings. So instead, just by shifting and going, why don't we spend less money on, you might not call it as much of a professional camera, but specifically the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II is like $1,200. And you can load a lot onto that camera. So I can really get it dialed in. And I'm doing that back over there. So if you want to see it after the show, after this talk, it really allows you for $1,200 and then get a $500 lens, $600 lens on there for under $2,000. I can view that as a unit that's going to be dedicated for that one purpose. I don't take it off of the desk. I leave it there 100% of the time. And I know not everybody can do that, but I find you have to ask yourself, you have to think about it differently rather than going, okay, what's the cost of buying this camera? Well, really, no, that's the wrong question. The question is, what's the cost of not producing as much content? Right? If you can have a camera that lives there and remove the friction of having to set it up, that's probably the most complicated of the lights and the microphone is getting the camera settings dialed in, and especially if it's not, easy for you. Get it dialed in once and leave it. Make it a permanent fixture in your studio. That allows you to just walk in and flip that power strip, the studio only power strip, turn it on, and it's ready to go. And having that mindset shift is so important to rather than having a really nice camera, spend a little less on a dedicated camera and keep the nice camera for the other stuff, but only use that setup so that when you walk in, you hit one button on the power strip and it takes less than 20 seconds for most gear these days to turn on. And even better, to take that a step further, there's little Bluetooth remotes for all these cameras nowadays, right? So you get one of the little Sony remotes, I think it's like $80, and then you can start and stop the camera without having to reach around and hit the record. So having some way to trigger it without having to do it. And the reason I'm talking about it this way is I train my clients who are not video people to be their own producer, to be their own DP, because they can just walk in and hit record whenever they want to make content. And if we can do that for ourselves and for our clients, that means that now they are able to do more. And of course, right now, everything is all about the having the required, just getting more and more content out, regularly, right? There's such a hunger for having all the content out. So I think that's a really, really important piece. All right, so before I go into the next section, any questions? And I'm happy to pull up any links on Amazon if there's any of the specific gear, little parts, of stuff that I like. Any questions so far from anybody on the setup that you're trying to build? Go for it.
Does most of your clients have like a dedicated space
Great question. Do most of my clients have a dedicated space? Absolutely not. It's a huge frustration for me. And I used to get really angry. Like, what do you mean you're not going to build out a room for the studio that you want? Don't you want a studio? Right? How often do we see a dedicated space? For me, not very often. And so rather than trying to fight that, I've started saying, okay, well, what can I do with the smallest room? I had a literal closet that I was asked to build a studio in. It was 8 by 6. I would not recommend that to anybody, but we managed to squeeze 3 cameras up against the wall, right, on a little ATEM video switcher. And if you go look at the setup that I have now, this was a few years ago, that type of work has informed the way that I design these setups now. My whole studio that I have over there is 2 feet deep and 6 foot wide. And everything is contained on a set of wheels that rises and lowers. And there's 2 lights, 3 cameras, so that for that exact reason, I can squeeze it into any space, like almost any space. And still, it's not ideal. No, it's not ideal. What I tell people is 15 by 15 is kind of like the ideal minimum. More would be great. But most people don't just have a 15 by 15 room or bigger lying around. At least in the world that I've been talking about. And a lot of people, even if they did, they really don't want to dedicate it, to having that sort of space. So yeah, I think it's important to try to have solutions that don't require, because if you wanted a 3 camera setup in the traditional way, that's going to be 3 giant tripods, right? Even if the smallest tripod's still going to have 3 legs going out, And then there's tools like I'm using here for my podium, like that are lower and take up less space, and trying to find like iFootage right over there has a great setup that's flush. It lives on the ground. Thank you. Yeah. See, is my Spider-Man? Dang it. Okay. Um, Finding things that are lower profile are really, really key. And yeah, the booth over there, iFootage, they have these awesome light stands and camera stands. That's a flat, heavy, round base. It's about this round, and it's got a pole on it. And it's just a single pole. So it takes up like this, even this one I could trip over. Those ones, there's no tripping possible. It's just flat on the ground. So there's all kinds of solutions to consider for yeah, having stuff that's going to work better in a small space and that's going to look better. And one really simple thing on that same note is the cable length. I've been surprised anytime I go, man, I wish I had like a 3 foot cable, for this one thing. If you look on Amazon and B&H, there is just about every option possible out there, and adapters and right angles. So I've become obsessed with making sure I check, does this cable exist? This weird cable. So, on the end of a power brick, right? When you want to plug a camera in and you have that other cord that plugs into the brick to go to the wall. So you've got a cable going to the camera, going to the brick, and another cable going to the wall. I was like, man, couldn't I just like plug the brick right into a little 3 outlet, splitter? There exists a nub that has 2 prongs of an outlet and then the connector that goes into the brick. So then I just plug the brick into whatever I want to. Obviously, you're not going to hang that off a wall, but if you had like a power splitter to go right to those bricks, that means now I can directly have a lot less cables. So I'm working really, really hard every time I'm building a setup to take a lot of measurements to say, hey, how could I eliminate some of these cables? And if you're if you know you're making a setup that's going to be dedicated, that the camera's going to live there, be intentional about having some options to pull from, with cables. And I just look at cables now almost as obviously I'm building a lot of setups for other people. So if you're doing that, I just try to get every single length of varied cable to make sure that I have, if this 10-foot cable could be a 6 foot or an 8 foot cable even, why not? Right? Use that, swap it out to just eliminate, just mess on the floor. And sometimes you need to have that flexibility and stuff too, but then invest in having a spot to coil up the cable and then Velcro it around and hang it off something. So it's not going to just be dangling on the floor, right? Velcro strips go a long way in helping clean up a setup. Any other questions so far? Yes.
If there's any specific moment that where something happened in a shoot and you're just like, I need to slim down, like any like cautionary tales.
Slim down.
Yeah, in terms of gear, like
Yes, well, constantly.
okay, maybe I don't this like yeah.
All the time. So honestly, so his question has there been a moment anytime I'm on set or building a studio for somebody where it's been painfully obvious that I need to slim down, I need to dial it back a little bit? Quite frankly, constantly. And I think it's really important to notice that. It's a wonderful question because I've had to make a habit of going, And it's become a compulsion where it's almost a problem, right? Where I get bothered. I get very, very bothered now by seeing things that are taking up too much space, areas of inefficiency. But as a result, now my setups can be really, really compact, and it makes my clients a lot happier because they're less stressed about the wires. We get stressed about wires a little bit, but our clients, they hate seeing wires and gear. It literally adds stress, and then the performance is going to be not as good, right? So it's really important to have uh, that mindset to go, hey, how can we really take and get things simplified and dialed back to help alleviate some of that stress, because that's going to improve the performance. And of course, also if we could tie that same idea in with making it more efficient to boot it up, that's going to even add more to more output. Yeah, great question. I love that. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else? Gear, whatever. I'm happy to nerd out. Yeah, you got another one?
What's kind of the balance between finding that convenience the clients might like, but also sometimes clients like to see a little bit of a setup, so we can explain.
Of course. Of course. Yes. Great question. Well, how do you find the balance between what looks like a professional studio and not being stressed out about the wires everywhere? And honestly, I really think it's lights look fantastic, and that's great. But big stands with all the stuff and the wires, that that doesn't need to be there. And so having the elements are important, but think again, going to that umbrella light example, right? I can have it big in 3 dimensions or 2 dimensions. I would much rather have it big in 2 dimensions so I can get it further into a corner, and it's still going to have that impressive look to it, right? And I think very related to that is this idea that sorry, where was it going? It was with yeah, the technical side of the, for example, resolution, 4K versus 1080. Obviously, there's cameras out here at the show that are shooting at 12K and 24K. There's some incredible high resolution stuff. For content creation, for podcasts, for Instagram Reels, as much as it pains me to say as a cinematographer, shooting in 4K is overkill for almost all social media stuff. The most important stuff is not the resolution. Yeah, there's going to be guys here that'll talk about, yes, it needs to be certain resolutions, all this stuff. But the most important thing is definitely the content itself. And so you can't fix, well, we can try to fix the person in front of the camera. That's a whole nother topic that I'm not talking about, right? Myself included, right? But the things that we can control are things like, I would much rather be able to record more videos in 1080, because even just from a strict data rate standpoint, 1080 takes 4 times less space than 4K, right? So why not shoot 4 times as much content on that same memory card as you could in 4K? That's a oversimplification, but that's the idea, right? You can do more if you can find where that sweet spot is to kind of carve out the quality to um, uh, the need and the performance, and where the question I'm always asking myself and my team is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Is it really worth all that extra effort to get those few pixels? That is that actually going to affect the performance? And it's a hard question to answer, and everything's related. Everything down to the camera selection, the lens selection, like I talked about earlier, the 4K versus 1080, the microphone selection, how we get it tied into their system. And yeah, I think that's a question I'm always asking myself: is the juice worth the squeeze? And that's, you can apply to a lot of things. Great question. Thank you. Is that what you're looking for? Great. Do you have another one here?
Is there anything that you have on your setup that helps down the line when you go to post production editing?
Great question. Is there anything down the line that helps with post production and editing? My favorite tool to help with that, and there's a lot of things, so I want to make sure I'm talking on the right topic here. But let's take, for example, a multicam setup for a moment. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen the ATEM Mini, that Blackmagic has, right? It's a video switcher. It used to be this great big, and they still have these awesome, huge, expensive, giant switchers, but they have it boiled down to like a $350 unit, the ATEM Mini Pro, that has 4 HDMI inputs in 1080. And you can record and cut between the angles, and the ISO models allow you to not just record which one you have selected, but all of the inputs at the same time. And when you can do that, now my microphone plugs into the ATEM, all 4 or 1 or 2 of my cameras plug into the ATEM. And so when I hit record, all angles, all audio, it has one perfectly in sync set of stuff. I don't need to sync the footage. And even better, if you're cutting between while you're recording, it makes a project file that you can open up and resolve. And now you can see all the edits that you made in live in real time, and then move them around. And it makes it so much faster and easier. Again, when I'm like, I have a client in Minnesota. He's going live every day for 2 hours. in a multicam setup that I built for him, and he operated himself. He doesn't he doesn't want to have a crew in at 7 a.m. every morning, and so he's operating it with a little set of buttons right at his desk as he's talking. He's got guests coming in. He's not a technical guy, but he's doing all that, and then when he's done, the recording has all of his edits, and he can pull it up in Resolve. And most of the time, all he has to do is like trim it a little bit and maybe make a couple edits here and there. But if he needs to, he can just change from one angle to the other and shift it a little bit later, a little bit earlier, because all that information was stored as he was doing it live. So that idea of anything you can do live so that you don't have to do it later is going to just speed up all of that process. One of my favorite recommendations for people is if you want to produce a podcast, let's say. Anybody here doing any sort of podcast work, video podcast work at all? Yeah, I got clients asking about podcasts. Exactly. More and more and more, it's become my main business is developing podcast studios. I like to think of them as content studios that can do social media, but really that visual, that idea, oh, I want a podcast. I got to do a podcast, right? So with a podcast, my favorite way to encourage my clients to do it is go live. First of all, the pressure of going live onto YouTube with your podcast is only going to, it's going to stress you out at first, your client and or yourself, depending on what you're doing. Your heart will be going, and you'll have the jitters a little bit because, oh my gosh, everyone's watching this. Even if there's only like 2 viewers, you still get nervous about being live. But with just a touch of practice, that pressure is only going to help the performance. You're going to have a better end result. And also, if you treat it live and you can even think through your graphics, like if you want to have a title graphic on there or a full screen graphic, bake those into the ATEM. You can load a bunch of images into the ATEM and have those show up. And I'm happy to demo that over there after this. If you can do all that, then you don't have to edit it. Change your camera angles, and you can be, doing all that live. And then when you're done, YouTube lets you trim the beginning and end of your video and publish it. No editing. Literally, you did not have to import any footage. You didn't have to sync anything up. You didn't have to add any graphics. You didn't have to color correct, because if you can get it all dialed in when you're doing it, all of that other work that we used to do doesn't have to happen anymore, but that takes a huge mindset shift, right? My background, thankfully, I feel very lucky and blessed that I worked both in traditional film and commercial production, as well as several years in live television production. And so I said, well, why are these two different approaches, right? We should take the techniques that live television has, apply a lot of the same exact techniques to commercial and podcast and content production, right? So that we don't have to do as much editing. And there's so many great AI editing tools out there now too that can extract snippets from podcasts for us, right? So here's my favorite workflow for a podcast. Shoot it live, right? Publish it to YouTube live, even if it's unlisted, just let it upload to YouTube live. I take that URL after it's done, and my favorite AI editing tool is called Opus Clip. Has anyone heard of Opus Clip? I love Opus Clip. Good. This is good. It's growing, and I love the tool. You can copy and paste the YouTube URL from the live stream you just did into Opus Clip, and it'll suck it down and chop it up for you. You didn't even have to store any data. You could just, as long as you have a good internet connection. I wouldn't recommend doing it that way. Also record locally, please. Don't just rely on the internet. You basically, though, in theory, you're going live to YouTube, sucking it down, having an AI chop it up for you, and you didn't even have to actively handle any data. It's all just being handled on the cloud by different services, YouTube and Opus Clip in this case. There's a lot of tools like that. But you can't do that if you don't have something like an ATEM switcher, where it's all going into one stream right to YouTube. And so there's no excuse now too with the price of these things. They're so cheap. Yeah.
Technical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Switcher, do you use video transmitters to connect to the cameras?
Like wirelessly? Great question. So there's so many. He's asking, do I use video transmitters into my ATEM to go to my cameras? I'm going to talk. That brings up two great points. Cabling, especially the ATEM Mini, is HDMI. There are a couple SDI models, but HDMI is a consumer cable, right? It was designed to go from DVD players to televisions, in 6-foot increments, right? The spec, I don't know if they've increased it, but I believe it only calls for a maximum of 15 feet for an HDMI cable. If you're doing a podcast, you got a camera over there, and a camera there, that's 20 feet right there. That doesn't work. So yes, the options are get a long out of spec HDMI cable or use wireless video. And I think the answer is both, depending on the situation. The best solution I found for longer runs, what I say is longer than 35 feet, I'll use fiber optic HDMI, and I'll just buy the consumer ones on Amazon. They're like $80, $100, and I can do like a 100-foot or a 200-foot run. The big gotcha though with fiber optic HDMI is it's not it's unidirectional, not bidirectional, meaning you have to plug it in. One end is for the camera and one end is for the ATEM. You can't flip it around. So if you do a big run and you had it the wrong way, and say you were like covering a choir event and you had to do a 300-foot run with a fiber optic, with multiple cameras, and suddenly you realize you've got the camera end at the ATEM, that's painful. I don't know why I'm bringing up that specific example, but yeah, then you have to go rerun 300-foot cables. It's not fun. But wireless, to your question, wireless HDMI, I love it. There's a lot of great. Hollyland, I think, is one of my favorite wireless units for the price. It's really incredible. I've even got a wireless transmitter. Forgive me, I don't remember the manufacturer. For my, who's got a Pocket 3? Anybody use the DJI Pocket 3? The 4 is coming out soon. I love that camera. There's a wireless transmitter for this itty bitty little gimbal that clips onto the bottom of it, and it has a little Sony battery. And now I add gimbal cameras to these setups that any person could pick up and look at the little screen and shoot with a little bit of training. And they're not having to have a cable with a battery that'll last hours. Like it's a really, really powerful tool. And so yes, absolutely wireless. The trick, of course, is especially in congested areas, it doesn't always work. It's another thing to go wrong. So as much as I love wireless tools, almost everything, if not everything in my studios is wired for that reason. When I need to hand off a setup to a client that doesn't have technical experience, I want there to be as few reasons as possible for things to go wrong. And wireless, often it needs to be reset. You need to scan, find a new channel, all this stuff. It's not like idiot proof. It's not dummy proof. It's not like 100% uptime, right? It has to. So if you've got the ability to, have a backup plan, of course, but also, know how to switch it. Yes, absolutely. Wireless is a good option. Great question. Great question. Any other questions on this stuff? Yeah. Yeah. The Blackmagic ATEM. Yep. Great question. It's actually named after the Atum, the god, the Egyptian god Atum, Atum, and I can't remember why. Before Blackmagic bought the company, they came up with the name Atem. It has something to do with, I don't know, being all powerful, connecting something or other. Right? It's a great name. I think it's a fantastic name. The Atem, they have a whole line. There's all kinds of them, big, small, 4K, 1080, whatever. My favorite Atem is $2,200, but it is incredibly powerful. It's a really long name, so I'm going to say it really slow. It's the Atem Mini Extreme ISO G2. It has 8 video inputs. I'll say it one more time. Atem Mini Extreme ISO G2. They have it over at the Blackmagic booth. It's incredible. Their low end is like 350 of this mini line, and this is the high end of the mini line, and it's 2,200. But the features that they pulled from all their other multi-$1,000 units and put into this one single unit is incredible. There's Thunderbolt in and out. I can send alpha channel video into the ATEM from like OBS or ProPresenter or other things, so I can tie in an app directly into the ATEM, which at that level of switcher is really powerful. So yeah, gotta check it out. And we're demoing it over there, so feel free to come by. I'd love to show you. The ATEM switcher is a game changer. And yeah. 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 So great question. So to get a little technical, feel free to, I'm happy to dive into as much or as little as this kind of stuff. What we're doing with the ATEM is connecting it to the network. So I have my Mac Mini or my laptop, or it could be a Linux PC or Windows machine, doesn't matter. And has anyone heard of the application Companion from BitFocus? How about a Stream Deck from Elgato? Anybody seen a Stream Deck? Okay. So Stream Deck, Elgato is here. And at the Elgato booth, there's another small company called BitFocus, B-I-T-F Focus. They make this software called, there's 2 apps, one called Companion, one called Buttons. Companion is the one that's been around for a while. Buttons is a new version that's a little more enterprise level. It's also a fantastic program. But I love to use Companion, A, because it's free, it's open source, and there's a ton of connections that you can make. One of my favorite connections is the connection to the ATEM switcher. So I tie this program Companion into the ATEM switcher, and I'll just show you real quick. It's actually really cool. 127, there we go. This is Companion. It's just a program. It runs in your web browser, right? And you can see here, I've added this connection right here, the Blackmagic Design ATEM. And I can go in here and select, my device if I was on the network, or I can manually type in the IP address. I'm not going to nerd out on networking. I'm happy to do that after this. But basically, you need to have a network that connects the ATEM and your computer together. And once you've connected to the ATEM, you go to this buttons page, and this is basically a representation of a Stream Deck, right? So this uses a Stream Deck, but you don't even have to, you can do it on a web browser as well, just use a keyboard or whatever, an iPad. These are all the buttons. So rather than input 1, input 2, input 3, I can say input Susie, input John, Bill, and I can have another one here for, group shot. I can just name it exactly what it is. And then when this button is pressed, I say press action, ATEM, set program input. And there's all kinds of presets here as well. I can go, okay, ATEM, let's go to, and I know I'm nerding out here, program, here's all the presets. So I can just drag input 3 as a button, input 6 or bars, and then I can go and modify these presets. And then when that one is active, the button turns red. So I can take just the features. If you've ever seen an ATEM Mini, they're covered in buttons. It's intimidating, especially for my clients. So I hide the ATEM for my clients and plug in a Stream Deck and just give them a few buttons for the things that they need to press. Turning a microphone on and off. I don't even give them levels because I dial in the levels and then I just let them turn their mic on and off. Right. And then here's the 3 inputs you need. You don't need these other inputs. I program them to do other fancy stuff. It helps me really simplify. They have a 36 button model, a 32 button model, a 15 button model, and a 6 button model. Right. So sometimes that little itty bitty one is perfect. They only need like 2 buttons sometimes. You record, camera 1, camera 2, right? Like maybe that's all they need. So it really helps to boil that down and make it so that you can just turn it on and just press the one thing to be focused. Kind of going to my original point, how can you make it really, really simple so that you don't get stressed out about it? Because I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you need to give a presentation or you need to be in an important meeting. You get that feeling, and I hate it. It happens to me all the time where you get like tunnel vision and suddenly you can't think straight, right? That feeling happens to everybody in some place in life, right? And so especially when you're needing to record something important, we need to remove all of that stuff to make it really painfully obvious. There's the record button. On the ATEMs, for example, there's like seriously 100 buttons on the front of this thing, and the record button is just itty bitty little record button in the corner. It's hard to see it, right? So if I can have a dedicated live stream button or a record button, and Companion is a really, really, really powerful tool to take advantage of that, and it's free. But it's not just, last thing I'll show you with Companion, these are the connections. This is the list of different devices, mixers, we've got audio inputs, we've got software like Pro Presenter, we've got all kinds of, I'm just in B, right? I'm still scrolling. Bird dogs, some of these like type of cameras, like these bird dog cameras, you can connect to Companion. I can control so many things. And because it's open source, there's Joseph Adams is one of my favorite Companion programmers. I've hired him to write several of these connections. When I have a device that has an Ethernet jack on it, I go, oh, that means I could probably control it. I hop in here, I type, does Sony have this, whatever. And if you type Sony, this is just the Sony stuff that pops up, right? And if I don't see it, I go, Joseph, does this exist? And he goes, no. I say, can you write it for me? And I say, how much will it cost? That's usually a couple $100, maybe a few $100, depending on how complicated it is. Yes. Oh, he's testing something. Sorry. Thought you were raising your hand, John. Sorry about that. Great. Yes, go ahead.
The limitations I was wondering about with the A10 recording multiple audio ISO tracks.
Yeah.
I've only got a couple of audio inputs.
Yes, it's a great question. Okay, so the question is the limitations when it comes to audio with the A10 mini line. Are you talking the mini line specifically? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So this is a huge bummer for me when I first started working at ATEMs. There's usually on a lot of the mini lines, not all of them, I'll get to that in a second. Most of the A10 mini lines have 2 little headphone jack, the little 1/8 inch connector, the 3.5 millimeter connector, which has, each of them is a stereo connector. So that means there's 2 stereo connectors. What does it mean? There's a left and a right channel on one and a left and a right on the other. That's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 channels. So usually what I'll do is I'll break out those 4 channels into 2 different Y cables that go 1/8 inch to left 1/4 inch and left and right 1/4 inch. So now I've got 2 1/4 inch jacks I could plug into like an audio preamp. So now I can get 4 microphones with XLR connectors into an ATEM by using a couple different preamps or maybe 1 4-channel preamp. And so that allows me to actually get a decent, it's an analog connection, so you got to be careful. You want really, really short cables and all that kind of stuff. It's not balanced. There's a lot of technical limitations there. But that's a way to get 4 channels into an ATEM. Another great hack is even on the ATEM Mini with 4 HDMI inputs, each camera over HDMI is sending a left and a right channel of audio. So most cameras have a mic input on the camera. So you can actually get 4 times 2, 8, plus 2 times 2, 4, 12 channels of audio into an A10 Mini Pro if you're a little creative. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but if you're desperate, you could. The best solution is the new A10 Mini Extreme ISO G2 because it has a MADI, M-A-D-I connector. It's an SDI connector. And they sell these, they call them the microphone converter box. And it's an SDI cable that goes to this box. And this box has 4 XLR inputs on it. And they're really high quality preamps. And you can daisy chain up to 32 channels of those together. So now on the A10 Mini Extreme ISO G2 and the other high end, that's one of my favorite features that they pulled from the high end switchers is this MADI connector. Now I can have 32 channels of balanced audio going digitally into the ATEM that I can manage from the ATEM software control. It's beautiful. I don't need to have a separate mixer. I do it all in the ATEM, stay in one area. And the audio on the, when you hit record, each channel is recorded in an uncompressed WAV file separately. So it's a beautiful, beautiful way to do it because 32 channels, it's great. And the boxes, that's 4 channels. So if I need to have some microphones over there, I set in one box over here with one cable for 4 channels, one SDI, and another box over there. Again, I just daisy chain them together. It's awesome. It's my favorite. Yeah, great question. Real question for you this time, John? Yeah? Yeah.
But you get a box that's high quality, right? That you plug in.
Got a mic?
There's a great box that you could get which has high quality transformers, comes out to 1/4 inch. You could adjust it. It's got preamps in it, and it cleans up the audio that goes into the ATEM. It's a
Oh, great.
$350
I need this link from you. What's it
Yeah.
called?
And that's I was going to go on. Yeah, I'm going to
Talk to John after. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I we'll figure out how to do it, but the key to that is the shortest cable between.
Yes, that's what I was just
Yeah.
saying. Yeah, I use a Behringer Mic 300. It's $100 for one channel. It's got a tube preamp, and I plug the microphone into that, and then I take a really short 6-inch cable that's 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch to plug into the ATEMs. I think is that kind of what you're describing?
Yeah, that's doing it. It's basically they're an ISO box. If you
Yeah,
go to black,
exactly.
if
Yeah.
you go on to B&H, you'll see it.
Yeah.
And it's an engineering company. It's a green box.
Yeah, you're talking about I know the green one. Yeah, exactly. Those
Yeah.
are great as well. Yeah, there's a lot of options out there. I refer to them typically just as a preamp, and I like it when I can have a compressor built into that as well, even though I can do that on the ATEM. Anyway, I'm nerding out. Yes.
Your set and forget audio. What might that?
Great. What's my set and forget microphone setup? And how am I doing on time? Am I over? Are we okay? All right. I'm happy to go as long as you guys want, by the way. Set and forget microphone setup. Great, great question. The way I explain it to my clients is we have 3 choices for microphones, and oftentimes I'll limit them to 2 depending on what I'm seeing in their situation. But of course, we all know wireless mics, right? Like a little clip-on lav mic, like kind of like I'm wearing right now. And the way I explain it is if you need to move around, this is how the oversimplification I give to my clients. If you need to move around, wireless mic, that's the best choice, right? The downside, of course, is battery, right? And then I say there's also an overhead mic. Have you ever seen those guys? And this is what I tell my clients. I know you guys know this. Have you ever seen those guys in a movie set holding the pole? That's an overhead mic, even though I would know it as a boom mic or a shotgun mic. I'm not going to scare them with these loud words, right? I say it's an overhead mic. And they go, oh, yeah, yeah. What's great about that is it's invisible. It's above the camera. This is how I explain it again to my clients. But it has a sweet spot. You can't move out of the sweet spot. So that's what I say it's only for one spot. And the other style that I explain is a podcast style mic, meaning a dynamic microphone that you hold in front of your face. And a lot of my clients these days, especially with the podcast boom that we've been seeing, they all want the look of that. And even though I used to go, man, I'd rather have a boom mic. It's invisible. No, they want to see that cool looking mic. Was it you asking about, what's the look, or yeah, you were asking about that, right? What's the things that you want to see? So more and more, I really like of course, the go-to people call it the Joe Rogan mic, the SM7B. I'm from Minnesota, so I call it the Prince mic. He recorded with that quite a bit as well. But the SM7B is a fantastic mic. There's also the SM7DB, which has a built-in signal booster. But they're $500-600 per microphone, which it's a great mic. It's worth every penny. But there are plenty of other like $100 mics, like the Rode Pod mic is $99. Maybe it's 110 now, but it's fantastic quality, metal, solid build. It's really heavy. It's got a great look as well. It's not the Joe Rogan mic, but it sounds pretty dang good to most of my clients. So typically that's my go-to recommendation because it's $100 for the mic, $100 for the preamp, and a couple cables for less than $250. I've got a great mic that, well, granted, you need a stand for it as well. So less than $300-400, you can get everything you need, rather than saying just the microphone is $500. Plus you need the arm, plus you need the preamp. It gets expensive fast, especially if you're doing 4 mics. Man, okay, just the mics, it's gonna be $4,000. What, for microphones? But if I'm using the pod mic, and I can do it for less than $1,000 for 4 mics, right? So the pod mic, for most of my clients that are budget conscious, I should say, is my go-to. If budget's not an issue, the SM7B, I think, is the mic that everyone wants to have in their shot, is that mic, for sure. Yes.
Okay, so I got the name of the box.
Yes.
The company is RADIAL Engineering,
Yeah.
and they make a whole bunch of them. Exactly.
The radial. Yeah,
Yeah,
it makes some
radial.
great audio tools.
And they have a passive one, they have active ones. But I guess the thing I want to emphasize is what you're saying is audio is key.
It's so key.
Yeah, and so they have things to eliminate hum. They have things to make
Yes.
sure you can connect.
Hum is just
Yeah,
can be really bad. Yeah, so they have some great tools
so
for that.
you could have a not perfect image,
Yes.
bad audio, you're dead. So people, when they look at this, say, this is an expensive set of boxes you're carrying when they're $200-300.
Yeah.
But they've saved me thousands of dollars
Yes.
retakes because I was able to get hum out of a line.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
Just
Yeah.
this bad just saying
No, yeah,
Thank
Radial.
you know,
They
the
make
name
some great
just
tools.
the group.
Yeah. Radial and Behringer, I use both of those lines a lot for my clients, depending on the thing I'm looking for. I want to give you guys one more concept here that he just reminded me of, right? The priority. What's the most important thing? What do I get first? I get this question a lot. What do I buy first? And my answer is every single time, a microphone. Gotta get a microphone. And they say, well, what microphone? And honestly, my first answer is any microphone, right? If they're recording in a loud place like this with your phone mic actually isn't bad if you're in a quiet environment, if you're just getting started. It's not a great mic, but it's not bad if you're just getting started. But if you're in a loud environment, I don't care what kind of AI tools, it's still going to sound terrible. You know, if you have a microphone that's a few feet away from your face in a loud environment like a show floor, you got to have a microphone that's like this, close to your mouth, right? The way, I don't remember the technical, what is it, 6 dB increase or decrease every time you half, or there's like a square ratio. Anyway, I try not to get too technical with my clients. What I say is the closer you are to the mic, obviously, the louder it is, and it's a curve. And so you got to have the mic really, really close to you. So you can hop on Amazon, B&H for $50 and get a little, clip-in USB microphone, and that's going to sound any one of those practically is going to sound better than the mic that you have out there. So then when it comes to a studio setup, again, a USB mic, something you could plug into your computer, $50. Get it close. That's the thing. A lot of my clients will buy a fancy mic, they'll set it on their desk way over here, and now it sounds worse. Well, I just bought this $200 microphone. Why is it? Well, because you got to have it right here, right? What I tell people is 3 inches or less, if possible, for a dynamic style microphone. Like, and I do the water sign for whatever reason. 3 inches or less away from your mic. Like, you gotta eat the microphone, and it takes practice for people that aren't doing that a lot. They just got to be really close. And even in a loud environment, and we have the SM7B over there at our podcast studio, it sounds fantastic. At the busiest moments in the show, because we're so close to the microphone, it sounds great still. Great questions. Anything else, guys? Oh, I was talking about priority. Sorry. Audio is number 1. Number 2 is nothing to do with gear. It's what's behind you. Again, at this point, when you're first getting started, I don't care what camera you have. If you have any lights, you got to have a good mic. That's number 1 priority. But the number 2 thing is your background, what we have behind you. So often, I'm sure you guys have seen some of those examples of people that are a Zoom guest on CNN, and it's like, you had what in the background? My God, like, that's crazy. It's incredible. But you got to think about it. Most people just don't think about it. I don't want to see a blank white wall. I want to have something interesting, but aim your camera at the right thing. Have something that's somewhat interesting behind you. That's number 2, right? Number 3, you might think I'm going to say camera. No, before I even get to camera, it's lights. I want to have just a little bit of light, at least soft light is what I would say. That could be a window, that could be a fixture, but that's the number 3 item is lighting. And the great thing about this from a budget standpoint is we're kind of making a pyramid, right? It's cheap to get a microphone. It's very cheap to change your background. Maybe spend $50 at Target and get some knickknacks, right? You don't have to spend a lot, just something. And then lights, a couple hundred, maybe a few $100 on lights. All of that is together less than a decent camera. A decent camera, in my opinion, to really do it right, start with a webcam. If you're doing it on a computer or your phone, is probably the best thing to start with. And then upgrade to a real camera from Sony, Canon, Blackmagic. There's a lot of great options out there. But you're going to have to spend for a camera and a lens at least a couple $1,000s, right? And so when you are trying to budget that out and figure out, a lot of people want to ease into it, the last thing I would suggest you buy is your camera, and then start to think about like the switchers and all that, when you really want to get into it. But you don't need to start with all of that. The most important thing is just to encourage yourself and your clients to start with whatever you have, right? Because even if you had the most ultimate $100,000 personal home studio setup, if you don't know how to talk in front of the camera, and if you haven't had any practice doing that, it doesn't matter how good it looks, it's going to be terrible. So start with just your camera and just do it and publish it. Because when you publish your content, this is true for you guys and your clients. When you see yourself on Instagram or whatever platform and you publish this video and you go, oh my gosh, I'm saying a lot, or I'm doing this, or I'm, like, be critical of it, take note of those things, improve those things. But then you're also going to go, oh man, my lighting is terrible. My audio is echoey. What could I do to improve that? The only way you're going to start to see those things and be inspired to fix any of those things is by actually publishing it, right? That's the most important piece, is just start doing it, right? So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest point that I wanted to make here today. But if there's any other questions, happy to do so. As I said, I'll be right over there at the Creative Lab. Anybody else? One more we want to wrap this up with? Okay, if we don't? Was this good? Yeah, okay, one more, yeah?
Hard drive.
How many hard drives do I have? Max, what do you think? A lot. I've been content creator and a filmmaker, a producer for 25 years. So I was literally, I bought a new house last year, and I had to, move all my stuff, and I found a bin of old hard drives. And before I moved, I'm like, I don't want to move all these drives. So I like bought a couple adapters on Amazon and plugged them all into an old Mac, because it had like a FireWire connector and some of this stuff, right? I'm like, how do I do this? So I got these old things, plugged them in, and I started transferring everything to a RAID. But I didn't finish before we had to move out. So after I transferred like 80% of the data, I still had to lug all these like extremely heavy buckets of data. I'm like, I gotta get this down, because nowadays you buy there's SanDisk was demoing an 8 terabyte, like one of these teeny little solid state drives, but those aren't. Oh, this is a good lesson. Does anybody know the biggest difference between a solid state drive and a spinning hard drive, other than speed? Not speed. What's that? Read, write. Yeah, speed. Yes, of course. That's the biggest difference. Failure rate. Yes, exactly. So the biggest way that I like to think about it is, solid state drives are incredibly fast, but if you leave them on a shelf for years, the data will literally uncharge and deteriorate and corrupt, right? So you have to kind of recharge it, and that could just mean plugging it in for a second and unplugging it. That charges up, I don't know, the atoms or whatever is going on, right? But essentially, you have to plug them in regularly, meaning at least a couple times a year, to keep the data in place. If long-term storage, though, slower storage, like a spinning disk hard drive, the bigger ones, will last, decades at least, unlike solid state drives. So don't store long-term data on solid state drives. I made the mistake. I just learned this like a year ago. I've been doing it for like, oh crap. I went and immediately plugged in because I've got a stack of solid state, like, that's all. Anyways, thank you so much, you guys. This has been really, really wonderful. Was this good? Did you guys learn something? Awesome. Thank you. As I said, please come over to our pop-up podcast studio booth over there in the corner. I'd love to demo. We can demo all of this hands-on and show you some of that. So yeah, ask me any questions.